Throughout history, there have been few execution methods deployed inside any country as barbaric and brutal as being fired from a cannon. This was a harrowing method used inside of the colonies by the British, and it struck fear into the hearts of so many because it was immensely savage. It was arguably much worse than hanging, drawing out, and quartering, despite the fact it was over very quickly, but the devastation that would be left when this method was used was awful. It was said that after someone was strapped to a cannon which was fired, that birds and other animals then picked at the remains of someone. It wasn't just the British Army who used this method, it was also used by the Portuguese and other nations, but few groups of people are synonymous with the barbaric execution method of being blown from a cannon than the British. But how did being shot from a cannon become history's most barbaric execution method? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. The execution method of being blown from a cannon or a gun was used to begin with by the Portuguese. It became known about as the explorer Francisco de Almeida in 1509 had many of his enemies blown from a gun, and other explorers would use it in lands to keep people in submission. Another Portuguese explorer used it in Mozambique, and it was something that would scar the minds of anyone who witnessed it. Being blown from a cannon literally included a poor soul being strapped or tied to the end of the cannon or large gun, and this was then fired, and the usual result of this was that someone would be blown to pieces as they were tied to the mouth of the cannon, where the cannonball would be fired out. The pieces of human flesh would fly up into the air and would spread over a large distance, and it was instant death. One witness to the execution method stated, "The prisoner is generally tied to the gun with the upper part of the small of his back resting against the muzzle. When the gun is fired, his head is seen to go straight up into the air, some 40 or 50 feet, the arms flying off right and left high up into the air, and fall at perhaps 100 yards distance. The legs drop to the ground beneath the muzzle of the gun, and the body is literally blown away altogether, not a vestige being seen." So someone was literally blown to pieces. The British used this in India to deal with rebellions and unhappy populations who caused a threat to the British military. In the aftermath of the rebellion of 1857, a number of people were shot from cannons, including sepoy soldiers who had deserted from the British side, and they were to be executed in this barbaric manner, and sadistically it did help the British to quell rebellion, as the executions were very public. It was used in March 1764 against a native officer who was captured trying to convince others to defect to the enemies of his forces, and he was blown to pieces in front of his own men. But in 1798 an uprising occurred amongst British soldiers, and they even shot one of their own men from a cannon as a punishment. It was usually used against locals and natives, and that specific example is the only documented example of a European soldier being shot from a cannon by the British. Other punishments were deployed, but it was considered the most serious. Following the Vellore Mutiny of 1806, the British had 6 people executed in this manner using the cannon, and the deterrent effect was successful after the public viewed what the Brits did to those who betrayed them. It was said in the aftermath of the rebellion that, on the 8th of June, 2 sepoys from the 35th Light Infantry were blown from guns. 10th of June in Ludhiana, Peshawar, some 40 from the 54th Regiment were blown from guns. On the 13th of June, 10 sepoys from the 45th Regiment at Firzapur were blown from guns, 2 hanged. The same day at Ambala, 10 sepoys from the 54th Regiment suffered the same fate. The 26th of the same month in Aurangabad, 1 was blown from a gun, 1 hanged, and 3 shot. On the 8th of July in Jhelum, it's assumed that captured rebels would be blown away. On the 19th, Aurangabad, 1 blown away, 2 shot. On 5th of September, Satara, 6 were blown away. On the 17th of September, Multan, 1 was blown away, 121 summarily executed. On the 23rd of September in Karachi, 1 was blown away, 7 were hanged and 20 deported. The local body count on court-martialed individuals then came to 4 blown away, 14 hanged, 22 deported and 3 beheadings. At the end of October, in Rohilkhand, near Agra, 1 was blown away. On the 16th of November, Bombay, 2 sepoys from the 10th Regiment were blown away. There were in total throughout the whole time that the British were in India hundreds of people who were subjected to execution by being blown from a cannon. Most commonly used was firing squad, but the retribution effect by using the cannon was hugely significant. The method may have been used by the Indian people themselves to get vengeance against the British overlords, but after the rebellion of 1871, there were 65 people who were blown from cannons, and things did often go wrong. Executions could be botched, but if this execution method did go wrong, it wasn't like a gallows execution, where someone could be hanged again. It often caused significant damage, not just to those stood around, but to people in houses who were watching a fair distance away. One of the most common things that could go wrong was the use of live ammunition, or even grape shot, which has in the past been used. When the cannon was fired, many civilians who were gathered to witness were often hit by projectiles, and some were so badly injured that they even had to have their limbs amputated to prevent infection, and they had only been watching an execution, remember. It was dangerous using this, and from then on, only blank cartridges were used in executions. But one of the most common injuries sustained to the witnesses, and also the British soldiers, was caused by flying pieces of bone and flesh, which caused further injury. Bone shards would embed into the skin of the guards, but it was also known that someone could slip from the end of the cannon, and that this could make things go also very wrong. One account of the execution method going wrong in this way claimed, one wretched fellow slipped from the rope by which he was tied to the guns just before the explosion, and his arm was nearly set on fire. While hanging in his agony under the gun, a sergeant applied a pistol to his head, and 3 times the cap snapped, the man each time wincing from the expected shot. At last a rifle was fired into the back of the head, and the blood poured out of his nose and mouth like water from a briskly handled pump. This was the most horrible sight of all. I have seen death in all its forms, but never anything to equal this man's end. One of the most harrowing execution methods used throughout history without doubt was being blown from a cannon. After the cannon was lit and the explosion went off, the pieces of human matter were thrown all over the place, in trees, and then the birds would pick at the remains, and even some stray dogs would eat the flesh. It was used in other countries too, and in Afghanistan there were hundreds who were executed in this way in the 1880s. Today, being blown from a cannon, shockingly, isn't taught inside of British schools about the Empire, and it is a harrowing part of the past which is not very well known about, being a tarnish and stain onto the reputation of the British military. They terrorised and brutalised many people in this manner, and they used the cannons to enforce their power and to keep locals in submission, and so they would stay loyal to them. But it was one of the most disturbing execution methods in history. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.